2007, Disney acquired a studio founded by Deus Ex director Warren Spector, Junction Point Studios, to develop a game they had been trying to figure out how to make since 2003 that was supposed to bring their worldwide mascot, Mickey Mouse, to a rebranded persona, with less emphasis on his pleasant, cheerful side and reintroducing the more mischievous and adventurous sides of his personality, focusing on the idea of depicting him as an epic hero. The game ended up becoming titled Epic Mickey. In 2008, an unforeseen disaster struck this ongoing project in a way they could never recover from. Most of the concept art, primarily the earliest sketches and ideas that were never going to be a part of the final game, accidentally became leaked out to the gaming public and took them by storm. Junction Point and Disney suddenly had a deluge of fans, expecting something light years darker and more intense than anything they were considering, resulting in immense disappointment with how significantly tamer the final project was than expected. If you want a better perspective on the Epic Mickey games as games and further history, I recommend these videos here on YouTube for some great reviews and additional retrospectives, all linked in the description below. We are reviewing the presentation and collection of unused concept art for this franchise, and we'll be referencing the original sources and its final product. But this is a gallery of art, not a video game review. Despite the game doing well enough, major gameplay criticisms, like a lack of voice acting and especially poorly controlling camera system, arose from reviewers and casual fans alike. But the scar left from people expecting a much darker experience never seemed to heal in this franchise. And it's that scar, all of its dark, twisted, beautiful glory, that I am taking you down today. You may call me Paulk. I am Paul's personal inner demon and your proud host tonight. I am taking you down a path Disney never wanted you to see. A hand they played with the darker and truly grim side of Disney, Mickey, and his world that the public eye was never supposed to see. And I am pulling you in head first to this world without hesitation. Take a deep breath. Cling on to your stuffed animals and Mickey ears. Take a trip through the looking glass with me. It may never leave you the same way again, but that's certainly not my fault. Now, before we start, since we're in the inky world of Epic Mickey instead of the inky world of Bendy and the Ink Machine, maybe I should wear a green thinner shirt instead of my normal yellow shirt to celebrate this in style. Well, this was an unused piece of early promotional art. Something that will come up a lot in this gallery is Oswald being the antagonist, or at least used as part of a bigger threat, which was an idea in the beginning. Because this is a Disney game, however, the number one priority of the higher-ups was how kids reacted to what was being made. If it would fit in the early 1930s and earliest 1940s cartoons tone-wise, without the insert horribly aged racist and extremely sexist imagery here. Before I was interrupted, then for the most part, it wasn't allowed to be a part of this game. Because of this unfortunate fact, anytime you see this symbol above me, it just means that the main reason it was rejected was because it was too dark for children and or it was unfavorably reacted to by early test audiences and the like. This is so I don't have to repeat myself every time if I can avoid it. I love the coloring on this piece to symbolize the levels and distance between evil Oswald and Mickey. Note the dripping white and black ink on Mickey. That will come up a lot in the future. This was for an area called the Jug Pump that was cancelled. The giant paint thinner jug was empty and held a major character inside, and here the giant lifter monsters would scoop up unwilling toons on the shoreline. While we definitely got our fair share of water throughout the game, I think a giant set piece like this would have really helped set the mood better on the decrepit, broken world that this environment is supposed to inhabit. This is a sketch for inside the chug pump, where Ursula, unclear if it was really her or a Blotling version, was dragging the gremlin Gus in with Mickey trying to save him. This is another thing that will come up a lot. Many famous animated Disney villains that would make for some great bosses in this game from the Disney Renaissance combined with forgotten 30s tunes. Instead, we got a bunch of original characters that left such an minimal impact in return. This was an early version of Dark Beauty Castle. God, what a great name. Where Epic Mickey 1 began and ended, and Epic Mickey 2 gave a 2-minute opening cameo to. I love the Sleeping Beauty style brambles and trees, along with the almost swaying design of the castle from here. The finalized version is unfortunately too well lit, with lots of glowing windows that really take out the dark in Dark Beauty. This was an early version of the introduction with Oswald attacking you instead of the Mad Doctor. Notice how he's shoving that very sharp, evil pizza cutter in Mickey's face, when in the official version, the Mad Doctor shoves a corkscrew, buzzsaw, knife, giant scissors, rotating eyeball, and then a random plunger with a poison symbol in Mickey's face and slams it against his chest before he's able to scare off the shadow blot. In the official friendlier for kids version. See the problem with this game's themes and concepts yet? They sure didn't. Wonderland seems to have been cut from the game as a possible world. Because of the fact we've already proved Disney cannot do a Dark Wonderland well, and other people seriously can. Seriously, go play Alice Madness Returns. I'm only a little annoyed that this world didn't happen. I'm still upset because, at the very least, they would have been obligated to use the characters we actually like for this game instead of the idiots that Tim Burton thought were perfect for a world without rules and logic by inserting more rules and logic. Second verse, same as the first. The neon purple liquid here actually could have made for a really cool third element in a sequel, like highlighter, ink, not paint, or something else. I really like this color choice. It's very Wonderland. Unlike taking a purple and pink striped cat and turning him into a grained Garfield with bug eyes. This was an early concept art for Mean Street. They gave it a much more damaged amalgamation theme instead of just gloomy. I love the details here of Pinocchio having a pencil leg and walking with a cane, the Mad Hatter seemingly having an X-Acto knife finger for a thumb, and the original long-billed Donald Duck design. Also notice all the way on the left side the Blot Sucks graffiti over a Mickey head and the 420 date. Whatever that could mean, we'll never know. This is a beautiful piece for a cut, cave-like design. It seems to be a mass of thinner and trying to envelop the giant, swirling ball of paint. Because Epic Mickey seemed to want to really emphasize this sort of yin-yang message and morality system in the game for different paths, particularly with Warren Spector being an amazing director for games like Deus Ex, I think a visual like this in the final game would have had a stronger impact. This piece is simply known as Mickey chasing Oswald through what seems to be an underground sewer. Notice that Mickey isn't using or holding his magic paintbrush, but rather seems to be throwing a lump of ink at him. Again, we will cover this in further detail soon. This was concept art of the Bog Easy. I love the coloring on the sides of the buildings that's directly inspired by the Haunted Mansion, as well as the dark, spire-like blotling looking down at Mickey. This is a wonderful piece that gives us a behind the scenes look at how they designed an area and its visuals. Notice a section replacing objects, examples of how they want the building to be shaped, and even using real life pictures of the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland. Despite my complaints about this game and its apron strings hand holding from Disney, know that I highly respect the designers and developers, and I recognize they put a ton of work and innovation into what was this studio's first game. I highly recommend you seek out this picture and get a better look at it, especially if you have any interest in game design yourself. The most significant story factor of the early designs was Oswald, at the very least, being an antagonist, not just an unfriendly character. This is a sketch for a cut boss fight battling him and a mech he built called the Steambot on Matterhorn Mountain. Note the remote he's holding that will come and play in the sequel. This is an alternative version of that boss fight, this one planned on taking place in Mean Street, the hub world that many times was considered for enemies, or even boss fights, but seemingly due to time constraints, just didn't come to pass. This is another version of the Haunted Mansion with some great coloring choices and foggy design, with Mickey likely having to go up through the graveyard to the mansion. Unlike the final Dark Beauty Castle, this looks like a decrepit, older design of this classic Disney attraction that fits well in this damaged, forgotten world of Wasteland the game's attempted, making it a lot more memorable and interesting. A spectacular landscape drawing of the now floating Haunted Mansion, including absolutely gorgeous rain and lightning, covering a rocky, dark, jagged space. This is the beauty and warped design without being too threatening for young children that the entire game needed to be focused around. Drawings like this could be framed, they look so good. Also note the spooky tree to the left. That is outer solid colored shell and glow in the dark green insides. Be a transition for our next portion of the gallery, entitled Shadow Blot is freaking amazing and my absolute favorite part of this franchise. It's very much a hybrid of Bendy and the Ink Machine, Fantasia's Chernobog, classic pulp horror comics, and epic kaiju monsters. Based off of the early Disney character, the Phantom Blot, no relation to the Phantom Shadow, he's easily one of the coolest looking Disney villains of all time, even without a great personality or villain song. So, of course, this means there's a lot of really cool concept art about this guy, especially since he was the main antagonist of this game. Here we have a great shot of him flying around trying to flatten Mickey, showing off his immense size and powers. He comes across here more like a tornado, even a storm, which works well. This was an unused early model of the Shadow Blot. This is the only form of this picture I can find, so unfortunately it's as zoomed out as I can get it. Because this dares to be an E for everyone rated game, we can't have our main villain have big, scary red eyes. No, make his face look like he drank too much Ecto Cooler and shoved some glow sticks in his stomach. Seriously, how does just having red eyes make him too threatening for kids? Show me how just changing his colors makes him scary. Real cute, Paul. Real cute. This is another version of the red shadow blot that has a more hunchbacked, pussing, and thin tentacled design, much like a classic sci fi comic book creation. It fits well with the game's time period that it's referencing, as I can easily see Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon having to face a swampy space monster like this. However, to me, this looks so much more like a large boss in a video game instead of the final antagonist. It's a great design, just doesn't translate as well for the type of character this one is based off of and tries to emulate in design. He looks a little more like basically a, let's say, inky, boil-filled swamp thing with a ghost lantern for a head, if that makes sense. This is one of the best official pieces of art for a video game I've ever seen in my life. This is the kind of image I would get framed in my own room. It's nothing short of utterly gorgeous. I can't get over the sheer size and beauty of this drawing. This is epic Mickey. This is visual storytelling. This is something only Disney can bring us, and we're not given enough anymore. Show me 5 subpar at best twist villains, and I'll show you a villain I will actually remember and am intimidated by. I applaud the creators of this drawing. This is a really cool and pretty intimidating shot for a couple of reasons. The green lighting works well here because his face isn't visible, so it gives him more intimidation. And the dripping ink off of Mickey's ears is really important to note for later. The setting actually reminds me of the cover for Castle Evolution, which I'm not covering today. Next one. Okay, that's just a mini boss. He is literally proportioned and shaped like a mini boss. Again, we have some really pretty ink designing and some great lighting here. I like this castle design for an encounter, but he looks more like a simple Blotworks creation with the head of a black and green version of the Ghostbuster logo. No, seriously. Same head shape, 4 fingers, supposed to be way scarier than it actually is because the brilliant potential of its franchise pulled to Batman Forever, and how much it just completely pandered to kids. One of them just has pupils. Fun fact, that guy's name is actually Mowgli. Cool. All right, now back to the great stuff. This is a really cool concept of the shadow blot rising out of a sheer sea of ink, absorbing the paint into himself, with a very Jafar snake-like head and neck, or lack thereof, and Mickey standing alone, defiant, facing the monster he created, and in trying to destroy, accidentally harmed an entire world in the process, bravely facing down his ultimate physical and mental demon of this game all alone. And no, Paulk, I have to interrupt you. Seriously, it pains me. The genuine, epic, dark, dramatic story that could have been done with all of this. God, the missed potential writes itself. Coincidentally, it also draws itself, making it easier for you to criticize. This was really hard to research, and it's extremely hard to edit, and you're not helping. Moving on from these continued altercations, these are the only Blotling enemy design sketches I could find that I found interesting to talk about. All of these designs are just so much cooler and scarier than what we ended up getting in the end. I recognize that this game was painfully made for kids, but remember Sid's toys from Toy Story, also in the same rating ballpark? A PG in 1995, and how much they still got away with. And that was almost 2 decades before this game. They could have gotten away with so much more than this flying purple people spooker. It legitimately pains me how Disney Junior bad guys, the enemy designs and personalities are in this game. It's pathetic. If you saw the first trailers for this video, you likely already been treated to this image. While there's a lot regarding Mickey that I will cover in the next section, I still had to put it here for how much it just seemed like the shadow blot is still influencing him with his unmistakably Chernobog-inspired shape. It's almost like the corrupted, thinner-filled Mickey is taking control over the shadow blot. He can create complete destruction across Wasteland. The pure good paint nearly choked from the brush. The rest you'll get to hear in a bit. This is kind of a quick breather before we dig into some insanely massive pieces that require a lot of background. This is technically an official image and design, and it was too cool not to recognize here. Again, I really hate insulting the first game and everything visually it does accomplish and get away with. I can't help but appreciate It's like Ghostbusters 2 in that regard. Even with a painfully kid friendly obsession, it still brings out some wonderful dark edge in areas and exactly what fans truly want to see. For all of my complaining in this gallery, please understand none of it is directed against the actual developers and makers of Epic Mickey. I know that they had a lot of difficult factors working in, and considering this is the first game the studio ever made, it's honestly impressive how well it holds up, all things considered. Okay, so where do I even begin? Well, so like I've said earlier, a lot of the early designs and story involved Oswald being far more directly sadistic and vengefully jealous of Mickey's success, as the game seems to suggest that Walt just abandoned Oswald when he created Mickey. Despite the fact that in order to make this game, Disney had to cut the deal with Oswald's owners to get the rights back to Oswald, and a whole lot of other history around this that stems back to the very beginning, and the whole reason Mickey Mouse exists at all, that's what the final cut with. Because of this, in the earliest planning, Oswald became possessed by the blot and took his form to corrupt and destroy all of Wasteland, shown here. Because this is Disney and Oswald was free to become a bigger cash cow than the games turned out to be, they shot this story down faster than the early test screenings of the Black Cauldron. This is just a further example of what they wanted to do, as the Oswald blot swings his giant gangly arms, dropping spatters down on our heroes as a Stranger Things red sky rolls in over what seems to be either Dark Beauty Castle or the party tent from Mario Party 8. Another simply incredible sketch of the blot completely possessing all of Wasteland in a visual similar to the End of the World of Light campaign in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and becoming a monstrous, glowing avatar in the sky that our heroes must take on. Even with DB Castle kinda colored more like the Emerald City, this still gave way to so many incredible possibilities and final bosses that we just didn't get to experience. Also note Oswald standing with Mickey, suggesting that the Shadow Blot took on his form instead of possessing him, keeping the real Oswald a hero. Alright, now let's get back to Limeade Bendy, shall we? This is an awesome concept for the blot growing to immense size and just demolishing everything possible, with only the mouse in the center of it all, ready to try and take him out. The smoke and bolts of lightning in the background just really helps it all morph together in an impressive way that can't help but be admired. I mean, how much cooler than this can you get with this character? Okay, fair. This is truly the closest we ever had in the concepts to having a spiritual successor to Chernobog, with the flared chin, large horns, mange of fur like ink along his back, dramatic, piercing black wings, and gleefully staring down on the pathetic essence of good standing against him, using his paintbrush like he has the power of Thor on his side in a simply beautifully cinematic shot. Seriously, how can you get any cooler with this character than that? Holy shit, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen for a video game. According to Warren Spector, Disney may have been the cause of the removal of the Hero Mickey and Scrapper Mickey gameplay mechanic. In an interview, he stated that Disney gave the development team a lot of creative freedom. Yeah, right. But was a bit more touchy with how they handled Mickey Mouse. He stated that Disney had a bit of a hard time swallowing the idea of Mickey's appearance changing depending on the character's actions. They were likely concerned that it would have had a negative effect on Mickey's image if the player made bad choices. If you thought what I've already covered was the wrong kind of scary or creepy for you, and or you have a pure-hearted love for Mickey Mouse, I really can't recommend you watch this next section. it goes to some completely dark places. The obvious restrictions around Oswald being portrayed in a negative light goes fivefold for what you're about to see. For those of you who aren't scared yet, welcome to the most disturbing part of the episode. We'll see how long you last. Apparently, early in the game's development, the team was considering more adolescent proportions for Mickey, giving him a significantly different, more elongated design. But, big shock, there were very negative screening results around it. I don't mind the idea of changing around Mickey's body and appearance, something we'll touch upon more soon, but I don't think this design would have worked well enough for a classic Mickey. He's honestly proportioned more like Yakko Warner. In the very early designs, as a lot of this art comes from 2008, Mickey didn't have the brush yet, instead possessing ink powers funneled through his hands. It seems they wanted to portray a sense of risk reward and clearly giving part of you up for something better than yourself. Hence why in this shot, he's clearly ripping apart part of his own body made of ink into his powers. Notice how the arm is literally breaking apart and he is pulling his own drawn ink into his hand. Stuff like this comes into play a lot in this segment. This is a good example of how this is supposed to work without the brush, focused more on bringing obstacles and objects back into the real world, which probably turned into the thinner concept. I like the paintbrush and its incorporation a lot, but this is still a good balance between a darker, more young adult concept and the frustratingly coddled world of Disney's Epic Mickey. Disney, everybody! Mickey Mouse surfing a tide of ink and throwing balls of ink at a version of the Phantom Blot, yes, really, that looks like one of the most awesome Grim Reaper designs you've ever seen with a massive castle floating in the background. This is the kind of thing we'd see in a fan-made drawing of Epic Mickey years after it was made, not the actual concept art and earliest official designs for this game. It's amazing and yet so frustrating how much wonderful potential fell to the wayside, this concept and franchise. This was an unused design for a monstrous Mickey, not Mickey himself in the game. It's appropriately creepy and intimidating, but I think Epic Mickey only works when the world does not want him and barely recognizes he even exists until they meet him, as he forgot who all of them were. I'm fine with the hidden Mickeys. That's a staple of Disney properties, but an enemy like this feels too out of place unless it was created by the Mad Doctor or something very late into the game. This is where the magic happens with how early in design this game was, and its extremely dark and messed up concepts that the public was never supposed to accidentally see. This piece seems to be dated June 2008, the very peak of when the designers were most excited and wanted to do whatever they could to figure out this game, whether Disney would approve or not. It's also one of the few that I could find someone credited for, as this and the next drawing I will show were illustrated by Donnie Hamilton. I love this idea of the paint peeling off of Mickey into his powers, and we literally see the blue outlines as a skeleton as a very clever and almost meta concept for this game. I do completely understand with these designs why Disney shot it down, but it reminds me a lot of the 2010 Mickey Mouse cartoon Black and White, which is a very good thing. Another awesome design made by Danny Hamilton of Thinner Mickey, which could have become Scavenger Mickey, turning into a more fascinatingly monstrous and corrupted design, turning into an insane, savage amalgamation that would fit great within the time period this is inspired by. I love the concept of the ink stripping a tune down to their skeleton, really being the blue outline before getting inked and colored. But again, I can cut a little slack more, and that recognizing that melting works better for the game in a 3D environment, opposed to him being stripped down like this, as it's much harder to communicate with a 3D model, something like this. Read the damn slide. I am not joking about this. Ready? Are you sure? Embrace yourself. I'm not exaggerating when I say this is the scariest and most disturbing thing I will cover in the entire slideshow. Let's do this. Welcome to one of the scariest illustrations I've ever seen in my life. This piece is called Evil Mickey, drawn by Sean Melchor, and is the piece of concept art that I saw and decided I need to see the rest of this collection. Please really look at all of it. Note how intense the coloring and especially shading techniques are that were used for it. His iconic pants are cracking and breaking, and if you look carefully, he has a black scar around his dark skin where his heart is supposed to be. His hands have turned into massive dark claws, the ink rising from his shoulders and ears, a fang filled, possessed, evil grin with devilish green pupils glaring out. Really absorb that, take it all in, and realize just how much story this one image tells. It's possibly my favorite drawing in this entire gallery, and easily the darkest thing I've ever seen related to a Disney property, especially the most famous animated character of all time. And I applaud it for that. This one illustration is a dark, artistic masterpiece. Okay. Before we transition to our next section, here's a small sample of unused attack designs I want to point out. Note some unique designs and attack moves here, like the bowling ball ink move, a boomerang that would later become Oswald's main attack in the sequel, a bow and arrow for shooting long distance shots, a counterattack by spinning it into a shield, and even Mickey holding a rifle. Because, as we all know, for his neutral special, he wields a gun. This was an unused enemy design called the Guardian. I have to really emphasize for this section, most of the art shown here was from the very start of developing this game, when they had no idea what Disney would say yes and no to, and their excited, dark imaginations were ready to run wild and free. This guy literally looks like if the famous Abandoned by Disney creepypasta got a sequel about the Matterhorn bobsleds. He's honestly pretty damn scary looking, especially with all the skeletons around him. And I'm a demon for crying out loud. Again, this was the earliest days of this game. All the designers really had was that this was a game about Disneyland animatronics and characters tossed aside to ruin and turned into evil amalgamations made up of dozens of beloved characters from the Disney Vault. So we kind of have a lot of genuinely disturbing combinations, like that top right monster that includes Goofy's head, an evil ticker face, a sharp clawed arm coming out of a crocodile's mouth, Jafar's twisted face, a flamingo mallet head for a leg, a Donald Duck head on another leg. Oh, the list goes on and on. It's like Reanimator for kids. Disney make that. I kid you not, those top designs are of the Phantom Blot. I cannot emphasize enough how deep the rabbit hole goes on this game and its 2008 concept art. You know, the stuff the public was never supposed to accidentally see before the game came out. There's a ton of Disneyland animatronics and rides turned into things like this in the concept art, and there's just too much to try and cover today if you want to keep a decent pace here. I can't recommend enough that you check it all out, as the earliest stuff, unsurprisingly, is when it was at its most pure and evil. Oh no, I think Disney plans to buy Pokemon. That Machamp is wearing a Mickey hat. We now have to move on to Epic Mickey's sequel, as it Get your filthy hand off of me, Paul, before I Children of the Corn your arm and then maximum overdrive your body in the next 2 seconds. Epic Mickey 2 is one of the worst sequels to a Disney game in history. The story is boring, the plot slogs on, the twists are obvious, the voice acting doesn't fit here, the game is 85% fetch quests and padding, it's even brighter and more kid-friendly than the first game, the AI is atrocious, they still didn't fix the goddamn camera issues, the worlds are even more boring, the Mad Doctor cannot sing, the title is incredibly stupid, and it could almost pass for a G-rated game. This game personally pisses me off as it took the wasted potential from a still playable 3D platformer with a slightly darker environment and turned it into a dystopian episode of Mickey Mouse Clubhouse that is unpolished and ridiculously boring in every way. I hate this game so much. Are you quite done? Yeah, sorry about that. Would you like to help me with this section? Sounds good. Can't let you steal all the attention in this video. Without further ado, we now present our final section of the gallery, Epic Mickey 2, The Power of 1+1. Robin Hood is my favorite hand-drawn Disney movie, right next to Princess and the Frog. My favorite novel of all time is an abridged version of the novel Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott, and there's something about this movie that always sticks with me personally. So of course we couldn't have a Robin Hood world be in this game. Oswald and Mickey battling rhino guards with battle axes, leaping across massive castles, and shooting paint and thinner arrows? Nah. But wait, there's more. We could have had Mickey, Oswald, his girlfriend Orticia, and Minnie all together with Little John, battling the Sheriff of Nottingham and Prince John. But of course, they just threw this all out to repeat worlds that were already in the first game. I understand an intention that the creators had not to reference anything that was released after Walt Disney's passing, with the last film he ever worked on being The Jungle Book, which, for the record, was also a canceled world in this game with official concept art. But for the sequel, there's no reason not to dip into the vault of possibilities brimming from these wonderful movies that could have been explored. This is the worst thing to happen to Robin Hood since the deleted scene that ended the climax. It should also be noted that Minnie and Hortensia are in this tribe, suggesting that a 4-player or further broken AI version of the game was in consideration as well. This is the only evidence I can find of both Pluto and the Hunchback of Notre Dame ever being in an Epic Mickey game. A fantastic blotling version of Pluto that could have possibly led to an incredible boss fight or encounter really opens itself up to clear possibilities that just weren't taken, sadly. I'm not surprised, or happy, that Hunchback wasn't kept in the final version of this game, but considering that it was recreated in Kingdom Hearts 3D Dream Drop Distance, Kingdom Hearts 2.8, and Kingdom Hearts Melody of Memory, it's not like we've never seen this world outside of the original movie and disastrous excuse of a sequel. I think Tony J as Blotworks Frollo would have been pretty damn cool to see. This is an interesting piece as Mickey uses a Tinkerbell-style fairy sketch against a cut Oogie Boogie boss. This, of course, just busts open the floodgates of questions around the possible inclusion of Nightmare Before Christmas into this world. Inspiration from Oogie's boss battles in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, maybe even inspiration from the comic books, which I haven't read, but clearly all of that fell to the wayside. I, of course, mourn the loss of an epic Oogie Boogie boss, but considering here he's getting taken out by a fairy, maybe it wouldn't be as cool a battle as, well, this. Didn't that scare you as a kid the first time you saw it? Shut up, Paulk. This is some early concept art that was going to be used as promotional material that tried to focus on the key two-person feature of the game, with the Mad Doctor seemingly captive in the background, and to the left, one of the many Pete variants. That term is so stupid. Just call them by their names. In the game, foreshadowing as the true bad guy. Like anyone fell for that. Another piece of concept art directly spoiling the super obvious final boss of the game with a concept this series loved tossing in the trash, fighting a boss in Mean Street. There's really not much to say beyond it looks good but is nothing special as the Mad Doctor rides his enchanted tiki room, Spiderbot. Is Spiderbot with a hyphen or no hyphen? Now we see a rejected design for a Blotworks Jafar, including his snake staff with an open mouth, which happens when he becomes the most powerful sorcerer ever because reasons. This time, for some reason, his body is made out of the tar monster from Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed, which sucks and you all know it. Right down to even the damn eyeballs being the same. His main eye is blue. Shut up, Paulk. This was an early version of the Devil Caverns, with some honestly beautiful lighting and facial designs in this drawing. It's a very pretty set piece to look at that could have fit well into the game itself, all things considered. This is some pretty unique concept art of an early version of the section leading to the Mad Doctor's lab. Similar props, including those Salvador Dali-esque clocks, appear in the Disney Gulch segment of the World of Evil in the final product. Interesting how those massive, melting, distorted Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket heads are still less disturbing to look at than the live-action remake CGI designs of these characters in a PG film that softened itself into an obvious G, isn't it? What really fascinates me about this one is that it's an early version of the map and HUD, but do you notice anything about it? Like that level of purple substance clearly made for the paintbrush in the bottom right? Like I commented on earlier? Why, yes, I wonder if anyone would notice that, or what it could have even been. We don't get to know. That picture is all the proof we have of that existing in this game. Damn it. The Epic Mickey Fandom Wiki literally just says a scrapped object from Disney Gulch that appears to be modeled after Winnie the Pooh. I have no idea what the hell this was supposed to be outside of what feels like the start to an incredibly stupid creepypasta. Horrendous. But it's too significant and too one of a kind for me to pass up recognizing in this gallery, especially with the severe lack of interesting concept art for this game compared to the first for very obvious reasons. Well, all that remains is a handful of snippets about the canceled Epic Donald game, the rejected Epic Mickey movie concept, and 3 pictures in an interview so far regarding Epic Mickey. Future video? Incentivize them first, but yeah, future video. All right, but at least let me show this one picture before we close, just for posterity. Any world that has official concept art from Disney of Donald Duck holding a Tommy gun is doing something right in my book. Paulk, I allow you to now close this gallery. Thank you for allowing me some time on my own channel to discuss this franchise with you. I appreciate your insistence on doing this together.
Hey guys, can I cameo too? I want to talk about the third one no one remembers, Power of Illusion.
Are you going to tell him or should I? Do we have to tell him? Shortly after the increased amount of negative reviews for Epic Mickey 2 and only selling 529,000 copies in the US compared to Epic Mickey's 2 million units, Disney shut down Junction Point Studios with no sign of ever returning to the series, outside of a deluge of Oswald merchandise they could now freely sell, which was their whole point in making this game anyway. Much like how Silent Hill Origins was thrust into Climax Studios' hands with no prior experience on the series, and Vatra Games had the task of their first game ever being Silent Hill Downpour and going bankrupt less than a year after making it, Disney threw a very experienced video game director into a studio he owned with no prior publishing or developing experience ever and expected them to make a successful platformer that couldn't go all the way with its ideas because pleasing their shareholders and higher-ups mattered far more than taking chances and giving something significantly more adult than just a parent dying. Many like me view Epic Mickey as the game that could have been. Disney's Deus Ex, a spiritual successor to Fantasia, one of the greatest animated creations of all time. Kingdom Hearts without the Final Fantasy, something filled with dark wonder and excitement that embraced Mickey's past, not just the world he used to inhabit. Instead, we got an E for Everyone platformer that functions with a terrible camera, a disastrous and broken sequel that broke much of what wasn't broken initially, a forgotten but competent 3DS game, multiple canceled sequels and ideas that we have to save for another day, and of course, a treasure trove of art and concepts that live in their own little world. One we'll probably never see again. We can be grateful we at least have in our lives, nonetheless. No matter what path this defunct series, corrupted juggernaut of a modern company, or I personally travel down next in our limited lives, I will never forget the world of Epic Mickey, warts and all. There is too much here that inspires me, entertains me, surprises me, and welcomes me, for me to ever fail to remember such a unique vision and history like this one. No matter its final product, I can always look at this franchise and find something in it, somewhere, that I consider epic. Signed, Paul and his demon Paulk.